Okay, we're back and just having a very curious time driving the other day. I started going through a tune in my head, and I realized again, now we've talked about this a little bit with regard to memory drawing, but I realized again that you can't hear a tune until you've said it, until you've sung it, right? You have to get the words out there in a row and they're behind you. Is that a weird thought? But it's one that seems to have a correspondence in painting. And I was actually, as I was doing memory studies when I was a student, I was noticing that there was something about the pencil dragging and the lines showing up behind the pencil. So there's this curious thing about the intention of the artist, but then there's this whole line that comes behind. It's either right or wrong. So it brings us to an interesting question, which from Mary A., who says, we hear of Sargent recommending drawing the longest line you can. What particularly is that about? Is there something really being inferred here, maybe extending beyond the line per se? So it was, so it leads us right into one of the most interesting, to me, one of the most curious things about Impressionism per se. Okay, Impressionism itself. Let's see if I can get these things to move. There we go. Now, by the way, that picture in the upper left, these two on the right are mine. The upper one in the upper left is Delacroix, and I'm not trying to take any of shine. Is that the word they use? Not any of his glory or anything by sticking it in here, but or whatever, or to make myself him or something. But when you look at his, you begin to see some of that, the characteristic, rather what you might call longer lines. You see him running in a significant section of a leg with one stroke. So to do that, you have to have some level of preconception. But what's interesting about what I'm about to talk to you about is that you do the same thing with speech all the time. I mean, I remember when I was fairly young, and I think everybody does this. You're trying to figure out how you're speaking in some way, and I don't know. Well, we go through some funny stuff sometimes, but at some point there is a thing going on where you configure in your mind what you're going to say, and then the words do this thing, right? So there's a preconceiving thing. Apparently, there's some subvocal speech. Something happens in your throat event preceding some of that. So, but which I know nothing about. So I hear things and sometimes misconnect them. But it's such an interesting thing to to know that you are conceiving a whole entire sentence and a whole entire paragraph, which you're adjusting as you go and things like that, of course. But nevertheless, you have in mind to make, like we do in this little run through today, to make an entire thing that you haven't set up for. You haven't. I mean, I've collected pictures to talk about it, but I haven't written a speech and all that sort of thing. This is not that, as you know, off the cuff entirely, much to your chagrin sometimes, I'm sure. But what I'm trying to say, though, is there's something really special about this idea of, first of all, we talk about the conceptualizing in several of our videos, but now I'm talking about that extended line. And that whole idea of searching for the line. So the whole idea of searching becomes this kind of interesting thing. So, but unless you throw a long line, and I'm going to just do it talking about, say, some section, where would it be? Well, this is a memory. This is not memory. This is out of my head. This is not memory that way. But I find the value in getting enough of a line running down here against a line running down here so I can hear the whole thing. So it's all out there. Do you see what I mean? So it gets on the page. And there's something about what Sargent is saying that has to do with getting it down there so you can make another version of it. So now you've said something. Maybe if you're humming ta 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 ta, if you're doing, I'm no musician, obviously. But if you're doing that, and then the next time you realize you didn't quite get the timing right between the last ta-tas, you would do it again, right? And it would all be like a stroke of a line, a long line. So it's a long musical line. In that case, it's a musical phrase, I guess. I'm not sure if that's what they'd call it. But this is one of the things I haven't found useful about certain kinds of drawing, like construction drawing, when you keep on attacking the thing, hacking at it, hacking at it, hacking at it, looking finally, have you finally got to that line yet? When I'm this kind of guy who wants to actually see the line whole, even seeing it playing off another line, and then reinvent it while watching a third line. But to give myself a chance, like to put it out there, and then have it in my ear, so to speak, have it in my past, but you can see it on the paper, and be able to use it to make an even more beautiful line, to make an even more beautiful interpretation, or more truthful and beautiful, but in all those things. The longer the line, the more unity it's going to have, but it's not going to be the first stab. The first time you throw it, it's going to be just like that, a thrown line. It's a pig in a poke. The second time you throw it, though, you have all sorts of knowledge now. You're going to put it in a slightly better location to start it, and you're going to adjust the angle a bit, and that bump count's going to be improved, right? But it's a longer, extended line, and you're getting a chance. And I've said this before, some of these videos. You get a chance to review these things over and over in that way, as opposed to just poking at it, and finally hoping to get to the end and have it right. And I think that the version I'm talking about gives you more aesthetic leverage, where the other one it sort of locks you in on the model. The model sort of owns you. The model just sits there and you hold still, and you just keep trying to nudge it. It's just an interesting thought, and I'm only putting it out there for your discussion with your personal, speculation. But in doing a thing like this, I might have set out some bigger, long line, some idea of the big abstraction. I'm trying to create a flying figure here, if you hadn't sort of guessed. Those sort of the famous angel types. It's fascinating. For me, this is one of those places where if you're doing an invented figure, it's nice to know more anatomy, but how the torso conjoins with that kind of a tilt. With the hips, with the thighs, that's one of those places where you wouldn't mind just simply having played more with pure anatomy. But that's what I've said before about the invented figure. There's nothing wrong with knowing anatomy when you're inventing a figure. But I have learned in studying in doing drawings, learn to learn to learn these looks. These various looks, like there's that sag under the arm here, to learn that look and how many little blips there are before you get up, and how there's things about not the sort of sequential way, but the fact that it has that type, the way this isn't a good version of it, but the way the Achilles, no, not the Achilles, but the calf muscle. There's certain looks. Turn it this way, turn it that way, and you get to know them. They become your, so to speak, your friends. I like that what Millet says, that he says I know the anatomy by heart, human anatomy. I mean, if you're going to make imaginative figures, it pays. This is done from life, and so what you're seeing happen here is what I've come to value when people like Degas, Ang, Delacroix, that they are putting out a line, and you can see the previous lines under that line. So by the time you get to the third version of this line, you've already had a chance at it 2 or 3 times, but writ large. So you're talking about this thing as a continuum. So it has that unity hanging there for you, but it also has this underlying the lighter versions of it, the first versions of it. But it gives you a chance to, as I said earlier, just to draw this line again. Now that you have more information over here, you suddenly see how this is beautifully playing off that, and you see how that might improve that. You could say improve the, quote, accuracy of it, but what you're really looking for is the accuracy of the beauty that's up there. Is that a fair thing? So I have to stick my face in this to see if I can see where else. The line inside here is one of those places where you can see I've run some long lines and have kept chasing the longer line. There's so many aspects of that, though. Put it down, run a long line, but don't be trying to make it right before you get there. Draw the long line and let it be wrong. But you'll have heard it with your voice, like singing that tune. And now you're going to not just sing it again, you're going to just improve on it. Okay? So run that line lightly the first time, and then run it again. And by the time you have great clarity about it, everything from where it's beginning to where it's going to end, which would be the big point angle thing. but also the nuances of the way the thing plays, even the shifts in the lost and foundness of it are now fixed more greatly, more completely, more unifiedly, shall we say, in your brain. Well, that's that conversation. Uh, I I can do it this way as well. When I was figuring out a visual order approach to painting. That is to say, when I was trying to find best practices, I did come to the conclusion that, and that's a word that I wasn't introduced to by in the Boston School. That wasn't a word they used, or anyplace else. I mean, I do find that people use that word now, but it was never used um, to mean what I mean by it. Okay. So I just absconded with the word for my purposes, but Leonardo talks about the projective areas and stuff like that, and effects, and this what gets to your eye first. That sort of mindset is in his writing already, and that's characteristic of Meldrum and others. But what you now, but this here, so I can go back to this just as think of his line, but here's this model sitting there, and that hairline is probably ever changing. And she comes in one day and she sits down, and this line is just glorious to behold, and it really does a beautiful thing with whatever else is already on the page. And so you chase it down that day with that one thing in mind, but you're seeing it writ large. What is that long line doing? How does it interplay? What's it up to? How does in all these areas, whatever you're doing with this, it's up to something bigger. It's up to something with other things, as you might say. But more than that, what you're doing out here is you're setting out the spots, the different color spots. You're getting them out, and you get them out on the canvas relatively soon. And why? So that you can get them behind you, so you can see them as if it was a phrase. You see what I mean? I've never said it this way before, so I'm working on this. I was laughing at a guy I've just met recently, and he was saying, "I just love to do these speeches because I can't wait to hear what I have to say." It sounds at first a little vain, but in the second instance, you realize that it is very much like writing. It's like drawing a line. You have to put out a phrase out there, and over years, you're rephrasing, you're rethinking even the underlying unity of the thought and how it works in with the rest of the big picture that that defines your methodology. So that's just an interesting thing that we're right in the middle of doing something like that. But I've said it before. I've stroked that line before, and I'm suddenly realizing I never did see that there were three bumps. I thought it was just one big sweeping curve. If you see what I mean. Well, but so here, this is just simply a copy, and it's actually a copy out of a book of a Sargent, but I was actually in an early phase or didn't have a Sargent anywhere near me. And this seemed like a reasonable reproduction, so I just simply said, all right, now if I use my methodology, what would I do first, second, and third? My methodology was putting down, say, the darkest, what I thought was the darkest dark, getting out a lot of the color notes, dancing around, just floating out there, looking for, now, just in the color world, and let me show you one. I'm going to show you what I mean by that. But just in the color world, yeah, there it is. See, just in the color world, I'm trying to spot these colors around. This isn't a good, too bad these aren't shot the same day or the same light, but they're different. But nevertheless, what you can see was going on here, I was trying to find out what this note was doing and what it was doing to this note, to some other notes, all this conversation, the darkest darks and all these things all being set up there so I could begin to see this thing as a unity. So in the same way as I think of a phrase, ta 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 ta, as a unity, right? But so you get it behind you, get it onto the canvas. And then there's this really cool thing that you're doing there. All of a sudden you find that you're now living on the canvas. and I think good, painters with a past, painting from life, know what I mean, I think, when I say that. If you haven't yourself, though, there's this marvelous transition when you begin to realize that you have enough various pieces of data to begin for this thing to have the complete life that you see here. Now, this is an extended version of it. It's still not worked up, but you can see this isn't just color blobs here, but it's actually the empowered light talking to other lights and edges and effects and blah, 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 getting enough out there so you can begin again to see the whole music, and you're constantly reviewing it as if it were a whole symphony, even when you're just getting the first bars down in your paper. I wonder if you can see what I mean by that, why I would even say that sort of thing. But so that's a thing, and then you're out there talking. You're looking after your leading effects, and you're getting them in a conversation with each other wherever they are. I don't know what happened back here. That must have been dark and lost or something. But something like this, what is that doing? Well, you put it up there, you give it an effect, and you get another effect, and you get them into a chat with each other. By the time you get 3 or 4 effects, you can see whether you are in what that sound is. You can see what the tune is. Okay, but it's going to require the color values, the values, even the chromaticity, plus what happens at their edges, even to some degree, what happens if this is bigger and that one is littler or something, and they're wrong, if they're reversed, even that becomes a factor. And don't you see how? So in our world, in the world I'm talking about, you have this phrasing of the color. You have this phrasing of the effects, of this phrasing of the sizes in relation to each other. You know what I mean? There's this dance going on with all these multiples. Phrase after phrase after phrase covering different parts of the territory. But the more you see them in continuity, the more you can say, oh, let's try that again. So once you see something about this thing picking up here into here, maybe all of a sudden can see that this doesn't have enough light. This should have popped out further, and this should have gone, or this should have gone back further. The line. That's the line. That's the phrase. Okay, I can improve that phrase, but you got to get it out there for it to be a phrase, to improve the phrase. Or else, I'm telling you, you're stuck to the model. All you can do is transfer stuff, and then it becomes a wooden figure. I hope that's coming across a little bit. This is an example. And again, I've showed you this just recently, but you see the photograph was taken of life from the wrong place. The person should have shot it for the right. So there was a big space between here and less of a glare and also a few other things. But can you see that here? See how preliminary this is. This is relatively early markings. It's not worked up in any little way. The guy's not trying to study up the little figure, the particulars of that figure. But the person is getting all the data down there and trying to get it talking to each other. And this is the music of these verticals, for example. You're suddenly set up to need to work on that, but you can now see it as a line, which inspires you or drives you to put time in, because the beauty of this, the verticals, is a thing, right? So what are the verticals? It's like the set of the darks, or it's like the reds, or it's, et cetera. You see what I mean? But they become their own phrase. And once you put it out there, now it can be adjusted. Now you can try it again. And you just do whatever it takes to bring those back into, say it again, say the long line again, put them all into unity together. I don't know if this is going to be helpful to you or not. Sometimes I think I'm way, way out there. And I'm not for me, by the way. I live this way. But I'm talking about communicating with people at different levels, you all. So the upper one here is a tarbell. And but you can see the need to, now just in the simple way of things, to see the need to find out what his lightest light and darkest dark are going to be. But he's doing all the other color stuff, all the chroma, the red, yellow, blue, all that stuff, trying to find out what kind of a world he's going to be able to live in to produce the grand unity that he's already got pre-seen in his mind, right? So he isn't just attacking it and climbing up to it and making it better in one sense. He's already in the earliest phase of this thing. He's already searching out how things hang together. So again, hanging together is the phrasing, so he's very aware of, so we just say the reds, the kinds of cool reds that are, and by the way, don't assume this color is anything like the real painting in one sense, but I'm going to use it as if it were. But you can see this whole family of reds. You could argue these things are in it together on some level, all the way from the icier ones to the less icy, to the warm, to the really warm, et cetera. But there is in this thing here, if you get them all down, you can see them as a harmony, right? It's a harmony, another musical term. I'm having too much fun, and I hope I'm getting somewhere. This is one done by, I think, Mary. I hope somebody can correct me if I'm wrong about this. I think I've used it before with your name attached to it, Mary. But this is, you can see that you have to power up the blasts of light. You have to get the play of the lights for a conversation to go on about the light game. So that's the tune of the lights, shall we say? But can you follow a little bit what I'm trying to say though? The need. So why does that? What does that have to do with a long line? Can you see what I mean? So if you say a long line and you mean a phrase in music, it means the multiple notes going up and down, for that tenor voice, that creates the melody. Then you can maybe begin to see what the value would be of doing it over and over again. The tenor's got to practice the whole phrase, practice it again. And when he gets out there on the floor, he will so own that that you'll be stunned by how marvelous it is, right? But so we get this chance, though, in painting. We get a chance to visit these things, shall we say, almost embryonically, and that is that first line you put down, make it as long as you can, right? Now, you can always go back into, once you have a great note like this, you can always talk about subplot and variations within it and that sort of, you can do that here. You can't do that in music. Music, it's all behind you. But what I'm trying to say is the behind you part of this is to get the canvas covered and get all these notes intercommunicating. And then we just build those communications until they're profoundly true and beautiful. So I don't know. I'm trying to be clear. I feel like what was Alice in Wonderland? I tried to make it very clear. I stood and shouted in his ear. Sometimes you have to be able to see through the white patches. This is another demonstration that I've done. And sometimes you have to be able to see through, let the white sit there though, because you need some clean areas to work. But you see that you're setting out notes here that that this note might be this area, and this note is this area, and this note, you're searching out these things as being significantly useful and important to know. The hyperchroma of this thing, that sort of thing. The darkest darks, whatever they're doing, whatever the lightest lights are doing, you want some element of that. So it's glary, if you want to put it that way. But you're wanting to get enough of that out there, so to speak, behind you. In the same way as if you stroked a long line, you see how it's behind your pencil? Your pencil's down here, now the line's back there. First part of it is way back there, and the last part of it is near your pencil. So do you see how it's back there, is behind you? I didn't know if that's a useful way to phrase this, but it just occurred to me as I said that maybe I should just stay out of automobiles. I don't know. All right. What a thing. So, yeah, it's just a thought, this idea of long lines, of phrasing, of continuity, extended unit, extended thoughts that aren't just stifled, one little piecemeal thought after another. Piecemeal is that enemy word, right? It's a classic one that you learn if you're in an impressionist world. Is this piecemeal? Well, this would be, here's a piece, here, is that piecemeal? Well, it's only piecemeal if you haven't done that thing of seeing what they're up to together, right? So it's no more piecemeal than having to hit the ta, 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 that's piecemeal too. You have to hit each note. But they are landing in terms of chroma, they're landing in terms of values, they're landing in relation to all the other ones. So in that sense, it's clearly, definitely a phrase. It's a unity. So you have to do it piecemeal in one sense. I often like to say we have to work like ants, like one little pebble, one little piece of sand at a time, but we have to be thinking like gods, meaning we have to see the thing as if, like through all eternity. That's one thing about a musical phrase. You're at the first part of that beautiful line, but I do like Suzuki. But you're at the first part of that beautiful line, and then you know where you are. You're in the middle, but God doesn't know. He knows the beginning from the end. Do you know? I mean, he already sees it whole. Well, as soon as you're past it, it's like, what do they say, that hindsight is better than foresight by a darn sight? Because it has unity. That was my mom saying. But what they say is hindsight is 20/20. It's always 20/20. You can see everything, but you see like a God in a sense looking back. You see big. You see the whole. So we're trying to get enough data out there to see it as if it were, or to see it as some kind of a unity, right? And again, when you do these things, you're always living in a world of a preconceived unity to start with. In other words, you're looking at it and trying to grasp in your soul the essence of this thing, so that as you're working along, you know whether you're getting closer or further away. I don't know. Am I mad talking this way? I'm amused, I will say that. I can't see anything else that I might want to talk about. I only come to this because we start with talking about lines. We did talk about Sargent's lines. I'm not showing you a Sargent. But that idea of lines does apply to painting. It applies to lines in painting as well as to the idea of line in that way that Mary was asking, which is there something really big being inferred here? Yeah, yeah. What is the long line? So I put it to you. Well, good luck thinking it through. I look forward to some questions that, to extend that conversation if this isn't clear. But otherwise, you're just going to have to explore it and experiment with it. So thank you. And I have to tell you now that that we are doing that workshop in London, and you need to be, if you're going to be there, you need to be getting your, your reservation. I think there's some couple spots left, and what else can I tell you about that? So love to see you there. Oh, I know there was one thing, and that is that I am planning to do a composition workshop while I'm there. There'll just be a class in a couple evenings for I think 6 or so evenings in that 4-week period. So if anybody wants to do that as well, it would be nowhere near the cost of this intensive the last 4 weeks. Be in touch, okay? I don't know what Mr. Producer has done and all that stuff. So in the meantime, thank you very much for all your donations, for all your kind comments, and liking, sharing, and of course, naturally subscribing, which does help. We're getting really close to 18,000. That's kind of fun to see. I didn't dream when I saw 600. I was pretty impressed. Way back several years ago. All right, wishing you all a very good week.